to the Reboot Podcast. I'm your host, William Branch, and today we have a special guest, Cassandra Broomfield, my co-host's mom. She has agreed to sit down with us and join the podcast. Cassandra, how are you feeling this afternoon?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me.
You are absolutely welcome. It is a pleasure. I was excited when DeAndre told me that he was bringing you by for us to meet, and I was just elated when he told me that.
Oh, I was glad to be here. But for him to even consider his mom doing this podcast with you.
Awesome. That is awesome. That is awesome. So today, guests, we are going to actually be interviewed by DeAndre. He's going to be in the background asking us questions, and we're going to let DeAndre kind of dictate where the conversation goes from there.
If you had to pick one moment from your childhood that defined the man and woman that you are today, what would it be?
Wow. Do you want to go first?
No, I'll wait on you.
You want to wait on me? Wow. If I had to pick one moment from my childhood that defined me, what would it be? I'm going to actually say, God bless her soul, she's no longer with us, but it would be the role model that my mother she emulated in front of us, because she actually had to play mother and father, and her role model as a strong black woman taking care of 7 children was definitely left an impression, I think, in all of us, all 7 of us. My sister, God bless her soul too, she passed as well, who's a little bit older than me. There's 7 of us. But yeah, I would have to say my mother, the example she left as a provider, as a spiritual guider, you name it. She had all kind of hats. And I think that's probably the most impressionable thing that I can think of.
Okay. Mine is a little more, I guess it would cause more attention because I grew up with my stepfather and my mother, my brother and myself. But I grew up a girl. My mother was the eldest of 6 girls, and she had no love for no daughter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, even though she was there as a parent, she saw herself when she looked at me. So I spent the first 13 years of my life cowering in the corner, wow, trying not to be seen. But when I was 13, I started coming into myself, getting a little bit more courage to step out. But I think the moment that defined me was when I was 16, because I'm so used to being in the background of things, and people are always trying to put me to do this, especially in the churches, be the pastor secretary, be the church secretary, do this. And I was so quiet and shy that I would do it because I was afraid of, my mom getting angry that I didn't do it.
Right.
So I would do it. But by the time I was like 15 or 16, they were having a youth program at the church, and everything that they had planned was going wrong. And here it is, the day of the service, and the guest speaker wasn't showing up. I had been put up to give the occasion way back in the day in churches. You always give the occasion.
Right.
And I had been touted to give the occasion. And then we learned that the speaker was there, and I was so frustrated. I just took the program and I did the whole thing. It's like, because maybe I didn't want to say or hear my mother, tell me that I was a failure.
Right.
And secondly, I couldn't disappoint the pastor. So because you grow at such low self-esteem, you try not to get the disappointment from others.
Right.
So I think at that point when I figured I did it, and I did it successfully, and then I found my worth. I found out that I did not have to stay in the background, that I can do the things, everything that my mother said that I wasn't good at, I became good at, and I continued to do, push myself past my fears. And I do that for DeAndre and my other children as well. I make them as angry as they get. You got to push beyond that, because if you don't define yourself, life will.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That is powerful. And so it sounds like you take that anger and you turn it into a tool to help better yourself.
I did. And
Yeah.
I also, and this is only God. I got to say, this is only God, because up until I was in my 20s, I got married at 18, a marriage that I didn't want, but I'm from the Deep South.
Right.
I got married at 18, had a child at 19, 21, and 23, divorced by 25. That's when I really came into myself, because I didn't have to stay there. And I met a lady during that time, an older lady, and she was asking me, why would I marry? Because he was much older than me.
Right.
I was 18, he was 38.
Okay.
Yeah, like 38, 30, yeah, something like that, 38. And she asked, why would you marry such an old man? And I said, well, my mother said that it's better to be an old man's darling than a young man's fool. And for a lot of girls that grew up in the Deep South, even though I was in Florida, but we're from Alabama. I spent most of my, childhood between Florida, Alabama, and Tennessee.
Right.
And she looked at me, and she's being from Detroit. She said, well, why would you have to be anybody's fool? And up until that point, people don't understand that when you're indoctrinated into this stuff all of your life,
Right.
you don't get the opportunity or the free will to think for yourself. You're
Right.
told what to do. You're told what to dress, how to dress,
Right.
what to wear, where to go, how to behave.
Program, yeah.
You really are.
Yeah.
And then when she asked that question, like, what? It was, why did I have, you mean I had a choice?
Right, right.
And once I realized that I am a human and I can make my own choices,
Right.
that's divorce. I need to get a job, because he would never let me work. I got a job working for the state, and I got out of there. I got my children with me, even though we were awarded the home and everything. He tried to burn us up, so I wasn't going back there. Yeah, so
Right.
yeah, so, and I started forging my own way and making it with my children, continuing to press beyond my fears, because I've never done this before.
Right.
And my mother was like, no help, like if she babysat the kids, because I worked at night, then I had to pay her. And I'm trying to get a home. But my mother, did you bring them groceries? Did you bring them something? If we stayed at her house, you got put your own phone in. You're not using my phone.
Yeah.
So I kept on. But you know what God did? And He kept advancing me, and I kept loving. I started loving my mother. I just started pouring love into my mother. I just continued to pour love. I tried to understand her, understand where she came from, understand her childhood, because in her rages, she would say things from
She
her
would let it
childhood.
slip out. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I started putting it together that her hurt when she saw me and I looked like her, then she
Saw herself.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I started loving her. But I'll never forget when I was 32 years old. I went to her house. She had called. My mother would literally, when I was married to my husband, my first husband, she would literally come to my house, kick the door in, and a screen door if the front door is open.
Right.
And she would whip me because my husband told her that I didn't wash the dishes that night.
Wow.
And she would, so even as an adult, she still had that strong hand on me.
Right.
And I continued to try to love my mother. All I wanted was for her love. But I remember one day she called me, even though I worked the night shift, and she would call me and she would start yelling that I haven't been by to see her, and I thought I was better than everybody else. And I'm going to use a phrase that you guys could probably delete, but she would say, ever since you were a child, you always want to be white. So you act like white people. You don't come around. I didn't understand what the phrase was, but I've heard it my whole life, you know?
Right.
And she was like, now that you're working with all those white people, you think that you're better than us. And and I could never understand that. And I remember her listening to her on the phone, just yelling and yelling. And I'm going back over the years of how much of this has been repetitious. And when she finally slams the phone down on me, I get in my car and I drive to her home. And I walked in, it's shaking like a leaf. But I said, Mama, my whole life I've tried to get you to love me. I'm going to have to do this thing without you. And I walked out the door. And I remember her dog bit me on my way out the house.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
You know, but I wouldn't flinch. I got back in my car because I was so nervous. My mother was like the true Medea. She carried a pistol.
Right.
You know, so I was trying to just get in the car and go before she realized,
what had just happened.
Yeah. So when I got down the road, I saw the blood on the leg, and I just sat there and I cried and I prayed for God to help me, you know, because I wanted my mother. I needed my mother. And it was a couple of weeks. She would call, I wouldn't answer. And finally she called and left a message. And she said, Pumpkin, I love you. Please come see me. And from that day on, our relationship changed for the better, the better. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to ask you too, did you want to unpack that a little bit, but I think you've already done that. No, and I think it's good too, because in hearing what you said, I think one of the things that stuck out to me was when you said there came a point in time where you recognized that it wasn't that your mother was bad, but that she saw herself in you.
She saw herself.
And I think a lot of that, especially our African Americans.
Yeah.
We have elderly, or like our mothers and our grandmothers, who actually lived during a time when racism was a real thing.
She was born in 1926
Yes.
in Cropwell, Alabama.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So when she says that, it's not like she's coming from a place of where she hates white people for no reason. She lived at a time when that's what she saw.
Yes, yes.
And so I get that. And just like I was telling you about my wife's family, I mean, they love us, you know, they love us now. And I have no animosity towards them, but I do love hearing these kind of stories. And like you said, it's just nice. And it's not, like you said, it's not us, it's God.
Yeah, it's
God basically taking that veil off of our eyes so that we can see the truth for what it is, and then respond according to that. That is awesome. That is awesome.
Ready for the next question?
Yes.
All right. What was the standard version of success you were taught growing up, and how has that changed for you now? We can start with Will.
Okay. The standard version of success. Ooh, that's a good one. So I got two different versions. So from my dad, it was education, because he constantly had a book in his hand, whether it was, I mean, he drove a trash truck, but as soon as he got off work, he would take a shower, and then he would go in this little spot. We call it the spot. Everybody had like a spot in the house. When you have 7 kids, you know, you
find your spot.
Exactly. Yeah. My mom would put a blanket out. My mom would put a blanket out and be like, this is your spot. This is your spot. This is your spot. So I got two different examples: education, or military from my father's side, because my grandfather was in the Army, and my dad, he's my stepdad, but I call him my dad. He was in the military as well. And then from my mom's side, it was work hard. She didn't really care what it was. You know, she just didn't want you to sit around and do nothing, because my mom, she used to work for dry cleaners, and she had all kind of jobs. I mean, it was dry cleaners, you know, grocery store. My mom did whatever it took to make sure that we had food, and my stepdad, I'm going a little bit in depth, but my stepdad gambled, so that took a lot of money out of the house. So then my mom had to improvise. That's the reason why I said my mom had to wear so many hats. And even though my stepdad was there, you know, if he came home, you know, when he got paid and all the money was gone, you know, and there my mom sit with 7 hungry kids, she was like, okay, well, I got to go out here and do what I got to do. I mean, I've had instances where, I went to the store. My mom's not here now, but I never said this if she was still alive. God bless her soul. And I know, Mom, you're probably looking down on me, but she took me to the store and had me watch the door while she stole lunch meat for us to eat. I mean, my mom was that kind of mom. She's like, listen, my baby's not going to starve. I remember when we didn't have electricity for a year, and I was on the back porch holding newspaper under the pot fire, where she scrambled eggs. So me and my mom, we were real close, because I was the oldest boy, and she was the mom. And so she looked towards me when dad wasn't, you know, when dad was absent. And so for me, like I said, I had like education and work hard were the two things in my household. And again, my mom, hands down, I mean, she was the breadwinner.
Mine would be to marry. That was it. That was it. Now my brother, get an education, be somebody. Our eldest brother, which is, he was 15 years, I believe, older than my brother and I. He was an architect.
Wow.
And he was not sent to Vietnam because he's black in the South going to school to become an architect. So the government did not draft him. They let him finish his education. And he became an architect. So she saw that for my other brother. I'm the baby. So for the next brother, she saw that for him. She wanted him to be an architect. Only thing she wanted me to do was marry and get out of her house. Yeah, and I did that.
So it sounds like, and not to go back on it, but I know it's not the same thing, but I'm hearing tones of it, sort of like an arrangement, not an arranged marriage. So it's sort of like that kind of cultural thing that we see in other countries.
That's exactly.
Okay.
And all of that stuff that they're talking about now, and not to go into the politics of it, but with, child marriages and stuff like that.
Right.
That has taken place in these United States from literally from the beginning.
From its inception, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
it has always been there. And in the South, back in the day, that they would do that at 15, 16 years old, you get married or whatever.
Right.
And mine was because of perceived disobedience. The school that I would have had to go to was in Alabama, even though we lived in Florida. She saw no other school that I could go to college,
Right.
but Alabama. She sent my brother to Alabama because she wanted him to be just like our eldest brother. And when she found out I did not want to go to Alabama, it caused a whole lot of stuff. And I ended up dropping out of high school 2 weeks before graduation when we were taking our finals. I just had the math test to take. And I gave her some made up excuse. And the next thing I know, I was marching down the aisle with the family friend.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so it's kind of, he and I were friends, but I don't know what we did, but we produced 3 children and a divorce out of that. But now we're friends again, so we continue. I don't hold no animosity. Like, you knew what we were doing. I had no idea what we were doing.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
so, but with my daughters, I definitely know. If they could have went the rest of their lives without getting married, I would have been all right with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, who was the first person who truly believed in your potential before you saw it in yourself?
Again, Mom Dukes. Mom Dukes would always say, and it was, for me, it was the nonverbal. Like your mom too, sometimes you sit back and you kind of look at how she interacts with certain children. And if you're not conscious, you're thinking that it's favoritism. And it took me a long time. And my mom, she put it best. She says, it's not favoritism. She says, but you're okay. And the one that needs me the most is this one.
That's right.
So don't look at it as favoritism. So again, mom is she's like the star player in the family.
Mine would be my stepfather. Definitely Mr. John Henry Thetford. That would be mine. Because even though he was quiet, he raised 2 children that were not his. He stayed in a domestically abusive relationship with a woman who was a functioning alcoholic. He always made time for my brother and myself. Wow. And even though my weakness was math, that's why it was easy to walk out that school too. Yeah, my weakness was math. He would sit there after working 12, 14 days, and he would help me with my arithmetic. And I had the little cheat sheet up under there for the multiplication tables. And I was answering the questions, and he was just sitting there just going down the line. And then he finally said at the end of it that my nickname is San. He says, San, you're not cheating no one but yourself. If you try to take a shortcut, you're the only one that's going to hurt for that.
Suffer from it.
Yeah. So when he said that, to this day, I remember that in everything that I do, like it would be easier to do it this way.
Right.
But
Words
it
of
won't be
wisdom.
beneficial for me. It will
Right.
not. So,
Right.
yeah, that's the one that he believed that I could do better, even after I was married and divorced and everything. My dad came to me one day. We were riding to the hospital because my mother also had health issues. And he had asked me to ride with him to the hospital to visit her. And we were talking, and he was just telling me about their life,
Right.
out of the blue. And my dad was a very quiet person.
Right.
But when he spoke, everybody listened.
Listen.
Yeah.
Right.
And he was just talking this particular day. And I turned and I asked him, I said, Daddy, why did you stay with Mama? You know?
Right.
And he turned to me just as calm. He said, if I would have left, Lucille would have killed you.
Wow.
And I thought about this man suffered at the things that she said and all this stuff, all these years because of me and my brother, but mainly because of me, you know?
Right.
I thought I wanted to be like Daddy. Yeah. So every time I talk about my daddy, I always tell people that my daddy was somebody. He was somebody because he made me believe I was somebody.
Wow. Yeah. And for him to have the insight to be able to recognize that had he left, despite how horrible it was that you saw that he was what he was dealing with, that he chose to stay. Chose
to stay.
That's powerful.
Not connected to any of us, but nothing but love
a stepfather
and grace.
Too. Yeah. And which goes to show too. That's why when I talk to folks too, when you hear people talk about stepfathers and real fathers and all that stuff, when all the smoke is gone, it's that one who loves you.
Yes.
Whether he's your biological or not, because sometimes your biological don't, your step treats you better than your biological in some cases.
My brother and I didn't meet our real father, who's a Sioux Indian, by the way. Mm-hmm. We did not meet him until I was 17 years old, and my brother was going on 19. And Mom took us to Alabama to take my brother to college. Right. And she took us to Alabama and just told me to stay at the house. Somebody was coming to see me. Here I'm in Alabama. Everybody's that owned the house or out of the house.
Right.
And, well, his nephew came, who was a St. Clair County police officer. He came and introduced himself like, is this woman really going to put me in jail? Like, but then he explained who he was, and that's when we met. And for the years that I had with my real father, I always referred to him by his name. But when I talk about my daddy, it's my stepdaddy. Yeah, that's the only man I had ever known up until I knew about my real father. But I knew John Henry. That was Daddy.
And it goes to show, like you said, it's not the one who makes you, it's the one who's there.
Yeah.
The one that has that forever presence in your life.
That was Daddy.
Wow.
Wonderful answer so far, y'all. All right, we're going 2 more questions.
Okay.
All
Okay.
Right. This one is for younger people watching.
Okay.
And people to see the difference. Looking at the younger generations today, what is one thing you think they have easier than you did, and one thing that you think they have harder?
Okay. Looking at the younger generation, one thing I feel they have easier than we did is access to information without having to put the time, energy, and effort into researching and finding it.
Exactly.
They don't have to. They don't have to go to the library and go look up books and read and research encyclopedias and stuff like that. So I would think that would be my number one, and then what they have the hardest, and I think this is the one that's real problematic for me to think about oftentimes, especially because I have so many grandchildren, is the cruelty that exists on social media. This like never ending drumbeat of cruelty, which is causing a lot of problems in a lot of these young kids' lives. And then just them, having these fictitious personas online too that they think are real, that's not. So those would be my 2.
Exactly. Mine would be for the younger people. They have it easier, just as you stated, that they have the access to everything. They walk around with a computer in their hand 24 hours a day. If they're sleeping, it's laying next to them. So they have the access to the information. the thing that they have the hardest, I think, is on top of what you said, is communication. They can no longer talk to one another without using a meme or a click, or it's like we're reverting back to hieroglyphics with the children, because they can't write a complete sentence.
Right.
Everything is done in emojis and
Letters,
different things.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
so they don't have that. They're going to have a hard time in life talking to someone else. With my grandchildren, I'm constantly telling them, like, all this clocking it. Girl, what does that mean?
Right, right.
If you understand or if you agree, can you tell me this?
Right.
And it's like, you're so old, Gigi. No, honey. You're going to go to work and your boss is not going to clock it.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you're going to have an interview and you're not going to be able to do
gonna-
that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
All right, with that, we'll have two more.
Okay.
Light one though.
Okay.
This one's going to be based on integrity.
Okay.
What do you want people to say about you when you aren't in the room? Whatever that means, when you aren't in the room, what do you want people to say about you?
For me, I would love for people to say, and even my kids for that matter, is that he lived by what he professed out of his mouth. So not only did he say these things, but he emulated these things through his actions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That reminds me of a country song, and it asks the question, who are you when I'm not watching? I want my kids to know exactly who I am when they're not in the room, when they're not in the same country as I, that who I am is who I am. I try not to deviate from who I am. They know that I'm solid. I want them to always know that I'm solid. They know that when they see me interact with other people, that I'm the same way with them as I am with the people that live in my home. Yeah. So they can't say, oh my God, Gigi is fake or Mama
Switching
is
up,
fake.
yeah.
No, because I feel like I'm going to talk straight from the heart.
Yeah.
And if I have nothing to say, I have nothing to say,
Yeah.
So I want them to know that who I am when they're not watching is who I am when they are watching.
Yeah, it sounds like that authenticity is I think is becoming a forgotten art. I think we had a saying back when we were growing up, your word is your bond.
That's it.
And
that's it.
that's what I hear that that we're both talking about.
Yeah.
All right, and that brings us up to our last question.
Okay.
What is one thing that you are working on right now that's not for money or status, but for your own soul? Whether it be something that you're reading, whether it be something that you're building. What is something that you're working on for your own personal growth?
Well, the irony in this is that DeAndre is asking me the question that we're actually sitting in part of that question right now. So one of the things is basically creating this platform to be a voice for future generations, the youth, but to encompass spirituality as well. That's something we haven't talked about, but that's something I want to eventually talk about. And not just one particular faith. I mean, all faiths, in my opinion, is welcomed. I think that conversations about it is one thing, but when you have to debate and argue, I don't think that's what I want to get into. But the podcast and spirituality would be for me.
Mine would be, as we talked about earlier, I'm an old chick now just trying to get to heaven. So I want to, and I am a licensed minister. I am an ordained minister. I'm an evangelist. I do that. But I want to do something where the church seems to be going in the opposite direction of what it was intended for. I want to be that person that anyone can come up to me and talk to me and see God in me. I don't want to hide behind the scriptures. I want to be able to live the scripture. That when someone asks me a question, I'm true to them. And even if I told them my story, they would see how God delivered me from every snare that the enemy had placed in my life and see my purpose through the eyes of my past. If I tell you that I went through this, or if you knew me and you knew that I went through this, do you see me now?
Right.
Because all of that was not my power, but that was the will of God. That I suffered for just a little while.
Right.
And then he brought me up higher and higher and higher. Being a country girl, raised in the flatlands of Florida between gators and panthers, and I mean the true Florida before it get all pretty.
Right.
Orange groves all around me, walking on dirt roads, playing through palmetto bushes, jumping over rattlesnakes, not literally, figuratively. If I would have known they were there, yeah. But doing that, to have traveled the world as I have, I've met people. I've been on yachts with people. I'm not going to even do a name drop, but I've been on yachts with people that I never thought that I would have met in my earlier life. I've gone to countries and places not because of duty, because my husband is military, but because I wanted to travel there. For me, that's the epitome of who God is. He keeps growing us. And at the end of this life, I want to be that person that have poured out. I tell my children this all the time. I want to die empty. I want to pour out everything that God has given me. I want to pour it out, not just on my kids, but for anyone that needs it, anyone that approaches, whether it's wisdom, whether it's, dollars, what it is I can do to help someone, not to give it to them so that they can go and waste it, but to grow from it. I want to die empty.
Paying it forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't want to carry any knowledge with me that I could have given to someone else. Right. And if you want it, you can have it, because it's this thing here called life is a temporary thing.
Yeah.
We are not put here to stay forever. We have a purpose. Yeah. Pour it out. Die empty.
And those trials and tribulations are what help mold us and groom us to be the individuals we become and continue to be until, like you say, we leave this earth.
I would say that, since you brought that up, if DJ, do I have enough time? Yeah. So when we were growing up, remember I said I grew up with my brother. Mm-hmm. We're 18 months apart. My mother poured all into him. And, Jack Jr. going to be this, Jack Jr. going to be that. And when I started rising, I told you I went to the state and I started working as an entry level. A supervisor and an RN just kept pushing me to go back to school. I went back and got my GED. I went back and I started college and I started advancing from HSW1 to HSW2. Then I became a supervisor. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I was met by someone that only heard about me. My dad used to say, your name could take you places your money can't. And this man only heard about me. Dan Matson, I'll never forget him, walked into the ward that I was supervising. And he said he wanted to have a word with me. He offered me a position that I accepted as an SRUS, senior registered unit specialist. That means that everyone that I had been there for like 8 years, 8 years at the time, that I had worked up under, now I'm over all of them. Mm. They were given the same opportunities to rise up, but they got comfortable where they were. Right. But because I had 3 children to raise and I was always afraid that I may lose my job or whatever, I kept pushing myself and going to school, going to college while I was working a night shift and working a second job, And this man heard about me, offered me that position, and it raised me up higher. Mm-hmm. This is why you never know what God is doing in your life at the moment, but just keep moving, man. You cannot get stagnant. You have to keep moving. Yeah. And I kept doing that. And I left and I kept growing and going. And then I met my husband, and 4 years after we were married, he joined the military, and and we started traveling that way. And then I started going off on my own. But before that, I had gone to other island countries. But up until then, started going to, Okinawa, and I started visiting other people, not just for the tour, but for the people. I don't want to see the tourist attraction. Right. I want to see what's behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. I want to meet the people. Right. And that's what I've done. One last story. I was in London, and we were touring all of these different churches and stuff like that. And I can literally say that I have preached all over London, because I would run up to their in their pulpits, the older churches, they have a thing that's called the crow's nest, where the pastor, the bishop or whatever preach from when he speaks to the people. So I would run up to every one of them, and I would run up those steps, and I would stand there and say, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life." John 3:16. And I would come down. And then we get to the next church, I would do the same thing again. You know, I would run up there, and I said, "Wow, Lord, I preached all over London." You know, and that was, you know, never miss an opportunity either.
Right.
Okay.
Right. All right. Thank you for tuning in today. It was a pleasure to have you here, Miss Cassandra, and we definitely will have to do this again sometime. Thanks for DeAndre for the questions. And is there anything you want to leave the audience with before we close out, Cassandra?
Oh, I want to thank you guys for having me here. This was fun. Yeah, you can find out that I talk a lot. But this was good, and it was good. It was almost like therapy. I would love to come back here and unload some more of my luggage. You know?
Absolutely. And you know you are always welcome.
Thank you.
You know, so we will definitely look forward to doing this again. Until the next time, y'all be safe and God bless.
Thank you.